Welcome to The Business of Family, the podcast where we explore the stories, challenges, and opportunities of family businesses. I'm your host, Tammy Buss, and I'm a family business survivor and also a family business advisor. In this show, we will be talking with family business leaders and experts to bring you insights and inspiration so you too can survive your family business journey. Whether you're a founder, a successor, a professional, or just curious about family businesses, this podcast is for you. Today, we're rewinding the tape and bringing you one of our most impactful conversations from the past. These are the episodes that started it all: foundational stories, powerful insights, and timeless lessons from families in business, experts in the field, and leaders who've shaped the way we think about legacy. Whether you're tuning in again or hearing it for the first time, there's always something to take away. So let's hit play on today's Legacy on Repeat. Thank you, Peter, for coming in today.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it might be, but the topic might not be all that great.
Well, I'm very familiar with it.
So the topic today is, the mistakes that you make in a family business through transition. And I know that you have a family business. Tell me a little bit about the business.
So my father started the business in 1989, and he actually came here from Denmark. And he was originally in farming, and then he got into trim work, and he did a lot of trim at a lot of homes around London. He found a fondness for cabinetry, so he started doing cabinetry, which turned into bathroom renovations, all the way to kitchen renovations, then additions and whole homes, and it just kept growing on from there. And really his design prowess and his ability to understand how things come together and how they could come apart and go back together in much more magical ways was just a real draw to a lot of people. And so his business grew, quite steadily over the years. And I was, kind of just a lost little boy going through high school and so on and so forth, not really knowing what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a paleontologist for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And, so I do dig.
I have a client who has a son who is a paleontologist, and he's out in Alberta.
Oh, wow. So he took it further than I did.
He took it all the way.
He was more serious.
Yeah.
Well, my dad could tell I wasn't that serious, because then I was watching, cartoons on the couch and what have you. And one day he pushed me out the door and he said, you gotta do something. And so basically right, towards the middle or second half of high school, I started getting sort of in the business, but I wasn't ever taking it too seriously.
Mm-hmm. And when you getting in the business, what did that entail?
It really started out as it was a labor position. So I was doing demolition, hauling concrete, digging holes, which again was getting closer to that paleontology. I never found anything. Fortunately enough, that might have stopped a few job sites. But,
True enough.
But that's basically where it started.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of never really took it much more serious until I was around 20 or so, and I bought my first house.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden it was things started being more real. And I don't know if my dad just, he was really busy running the business,
mm-hmm.
And so he didn't have a training plan for me. Now I'm just currently trying to develop a training plan for an entry-level laborer, and their career path as how it would go, up the ranks. But we didn't have that. And I think it was just so busy trying to manage this business, let
mm-hmm.
alone show me the ropes.
Now, you have a sister, so your sister wasn't involved in the business at all?
No. So she was more into, she's a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of where her passions lied.
Mm-hmm.
And she ended up going out to Alberta. And
is she digging?
She's not. Well, no, she got 3 girls. They might dig. But no, she met someone out there, and she started a family. And she didn't, at that point, it wasn't really a family business. It was
mm-hmm.
what my dad did.
Right.
And she wanted to go figure out what she was going to do, and I was going to go figure out what I was going to do, and I fell into it.
Right.
And she was out in Alberta, so I just, carried on.
So I think this is true with most first to second generation businesses, that you don't realize it's a family business. It's just something that your parents did to bring in income. When did you really think of it as a family business, one that could pass down?
It probably wasn't until I had kids. And then and at the time it was such a tumultuous, thing to operate, especially with me and my dad. We had a different vision on how things should be and could be. And so like, I didn't really want my kids necessarily in it, because it was like, this is crazy.
As says every first and second generation.
And I was thinking, if they want to do it, great, but I certainly wouldn't push them into it, because it was a challenge on a daily basis.
Now, you say it's a challenge, and this is what I'm trying to get across to other family businesses, that they don't have to have the same skill set that you have to be involved in the business. Like social media, for example, might be something they're interested in. Just because you're in a construction type industry doesn't mean they have to swing a hammer, right? Yeah. And I think we as first generations, or even second, because you're the second generation owner of the business, that we try to think of our kids as doing what we do, and we have to get past that.
Well, and it was interesting too, because as we were, as we met and we had several meetings, you and I and my dad, that's when it really started to really dawn on me that we've got, a family business, I guess. Like it always was, father and son business, mm-hmm. But then it started to think, oh, this is like a family business. And so we actually re-engaged with my sister to see, is this something you want to do? And she said, well, what would I even do? Mm-hmm. And that's when I really realized, like, even with my kids, I've got 2 boys and a girl, and they all could fit within it. Like I told my sister, like, you're a social worker. You'd be great for warranty. Like you'd be great dealing with HR. HR. Like you'd be great for a lot of different areas within the business. Ultimately, she decided she wants to stay in Alberta. Mm-hmm. But I look at it like, no matter, my kids are all very different, and I think they could all find a space within it if they so chose to do. So, we're still on the journey.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, I think, one of the things with a first to second generation family business is there is no roadmap. You don't really realize in a lot of cases till it's too late. Now, you got dragged off the couch and into working with your dad. Your sister, clearly more motivated, didn't need to be dragged into the shop. But we tend to think, well, they're off doing whatever. There's no opportunity for them, or maybe they're not interested. But I think we have to, one of the mistakes, I think, and you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, is that we don't talk about it enough.
Well, and to that point, I think that if we went back and we had a plan, and my sister could have, she could have seen herself in it, mm-hmm. She might have gone that way. Now I have 3 amazing nieces, so thank God we didn't. Yeah. But, ultimately I think, it made me realize that it would be a benefit to my kids if I, had a couple, I would make like a shelf, like a wall with some shelves on it, and put up different scenarios on how this family business could go, mm-hmm. with all of them in it, with one of them in it, with 2 of them in it. Mm-hmm. And then they're working in different capacities, if one just wants to be a worker, or one wants to be an owner, or if one wants, there's different ways of doing it, as you very well know.
So we want to talk about a couple of mistakes, but I don't want it to be all negative on, the mistakes you make in a family business. But what were the top, 2 to 3 mistakes you think you made, or your dad made, or your family made, in not really realizing this was a family business, or, the communication? What would your top 3 things that you think you could have done better?
Well, the one was succession. Like that was just a big one, right? Because there was really no plan, and he couldn't even see when he wanted to be out. And I was more worried about if he was all of a sudden out, so we had mm-hmm. different fears and, the motivations around that. So the whole succession piece mm-hmm. was a challenge. And then I guess going back to that, training piece, like me getting to know the business, getting mm-hmm. to understand it. It was a very challenging thing. Like my wife was convinced that I'd be working, till 1:00 in the morning for our entire marriage, and I told her, I said, it's not going to always be this way, but unfortunately, I have to get my footing.
Yeah, yeah.
And my dad had the same thing, but I think I always looked at it from a second generation piece. He did all the hard work by starting this thing.
Yes,
and then I don't realize how much hard work it actually was to reposition it, or right. kind of understand it.
Because you've rebranded. And again, let's be clear on the name.
CCR Build and Remodel.
Build and Remodel.
Yeah.
And again, that, the first part of when your dad started the business, it's one client at a time, right? One job at a time. Then he's good at what he does, brings in help. And now it's transition. So your dad is now completely out of the business, correct?
He retired last year. And again, I actually just think about this morning because we have, multiple clients that have dealt with him in the past, and now they're dealing with us, which is another, mistake, I guess you could say, is that how do you explain that transition to past clients? Because in our business, we deal with people over the generation of their house, multiple. Every time they get into a new phase of their life, they need to do a renovation oftentimes. And so it's been trying to understand, how do I explain to them how we've made our company more sophisticated? We have more people, we have divisions, it's, which is getting probably more on the business side of it, but it is interesting seeing how.
Well, it's from one generation to the other, right? The first generation builds the foundation, and then you're taking it from the foundation up.
Yeah. And what do you want that business to look like? Because it's like, now I'm wrestling with, am I the face of the business? My dad was always the face of the business. And so there's a lot of things that you got to learn through.
So you said your dad retired. So does your dad the face? Does he come to any events? Like, is he still part of it, or is he completely retired?
He is effectively completely retired. We'll pull him in because the thing that the other thing that was hard is learning what motivated, why he wanted to be part of the business. And I came to realize it was the design. So he really enjoys the design, specifically coming up with how you solve complicated problems in a house. So now we've learned that we pull him in on specific projects where it can really kind of pique his interest and help him, have him help us in a bind. And he can really use his talents and feel like he, was a big impact on that project.
And what do you think you did right?
Well, my dad was always kind. And so I think, like, in terms of right, I don't know if we did that right or we just fell into it.
I thought you were going to say because you found me.
Well, that was, we stumbled upon that too. So I would say that, like, what did we do right? I don't know. We stumbled upon a lot of luck with, again, with like my dad's kindness, making that, that made it a lot easier. I could see if, he was, if this was Orange County Choppers, I think it would be a real challenge, but he was a real sweetheart. And, I was less of a sweetheart, but I was, a good communicator. And I think with all that, we brought it together and we had several meetings. We did go on car rides. I remember
windshield time, I think they call that.
Windshield time. And we would just drive around to new developments or projects around the city or go for lunch, and just talk. Sometimes it was with no agenda at all, just that we could just talk. And sometimes those got heated too. And sometimes, mostly they were just, nice and casual, but it depended on where we were with the business, and then to your point, falling into, we changed financial advisors, with through a recommendation to Bus, to your company. And then you happen to have this family enterprise background that was really interesting. And you've just really kind of like shed a lot of different lights in different areas. That's been really interesting for us.
And I think, and that's the key, I think, for first generation family businesses, is to reach out and talk to other family businesses to see what they've done. Because now that you've been through a transition the first time, you'll have a better idea how to plan for it the second time, right? Or how to bring in your kids or your nieces even, depending on what you want to do, right? It's now your company. It's 100% your company now. And that's your decision to make on who can come in, who can't come in, but also the direction. And I want to talk a little bit about the direction of the company, as a second generation. Sometimes there's a bit of a conflict or a difference of opinion on where the company should go. And because first generation, we've done it this way. We've always done it this way. Why would we change it? And I always talk about the fact that the second gen comes at things from a different angle and can really enhance the business. And one of the things you've done is with your own home. You maybe talk a little bit about what you've done and how that's going to maybe transition into the business, right? Which is a direction that maybe your dad wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah, I think ultimately the one thing there that you're touching on the net zero aspect of the house that we did for ourselves there.
It wasn't around 20 years ago.
It wasn't around. We had R2000 and all sorts of cool stuff. And I think that the difference between the first generation and second generation isn't necessarily the energy efficiency and the building optimization piece, because he actually piqued my interest on that. He's always been very astute in, how energy works in a home and how structure and all this. So it was right up his alley too.
Oh, okay.
So I think that was a shared interest. However, the difference is that I think the first generation oftentimes tries to do a lot of things themselves, whereas the second generation, from what I've noticed, is not necessarily allergic to asking for help, or at least that's maybe our experience. And so I think, doing that net zero build, it was a lot of working with, professionals in different areas. And I was very okay with not being the main professional. And I think that, that's one thing we did in the business too, is whereas, our org chart used to be a pyramid, and at the top was the chief servant, was his name.
Yeah.
And he kind of served everybody. And I quickly noticed as I was getting into it that I had no interest in being the chief servant, and nor did any, a lot of the leaders in our company. They didn't want to, have the chief servant serve them. They wanted to serve their own, departments. And so I departmentalized things. We're not a massive business, but we're big enough that we could have, a sales and design department, a finance department, and a production department. And now going in the future, we're looking at dividing sales and design into their own respective,
and that's the evolution of a business, right? With the growth.
Yep.
And, that's the second generation a lot of times can do that because the foundation's already been set.
Yes. And I think it's understanding the foundation, which is difficult as you're the first generation. It's hard to write what you're doing because you're figuring it out. You're building the train while it's riding down the track. And so to build a manual while you're also building the train is pretty difficult. So I had to basically step in and watch this guy building the train while it's running down the track and create the manual for it. And that was the hard part. And I think that, I don't know if there's a remedy for that, or maybe people get introduced to you sooner and they start to realize what the future could look like, or they meet other business, family business people, and they start to realize oh, okay, I understand. So we need to slow down and then get this manual going so that then I can get to the departmentalization sooner, or whichever way we want to take it,
So let's go back to transitioning from first to second gen. When did you think that transition in your mind started? When did you really think that I want to take on this company?
Well, I remember the day, my dad and I'd just broken up with a girlfriend, and I owned this house, and I was like, now I got this house. And I have this van in the driveway that says CCR on it, and I'm just this employee to this thing, and what am I going to do? Am I going to go be a paleontologist now? I was thinking all these things. Am I going to go back to school? And, it was getting busy, and I sat down at Four Seasons restaurant with my dad, and I probably had a turkey bacon club. I presume that's what it was. And I said, well, is this something I should do? And he said, absolutely, you should. I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And I said, well, what happens when we renovate all the houses? And he said, trust me, that's not going to happen. And so I just said, listen, I'm going to go all in on it, and let's make it happen. And then we kind of, again, we didn't all of a sudden know how this was going to go, but that's when probably the heated discussion started happening, because all of a sudden I was, I had a vested interest in making it serious. We did actually go through a mini valuation of the company, and I bought into it at that point in time. And, that's pretty well. I don't know. I would have been around 21, 22, something like that.
And then the final transition just happened this year in 2023, or I should say last year.
Yeah. That was basically, last year was a big year. It was, I wish that we had done a lot of that work sooner, go back to mistakes, and I think it just seems daunting when you're trying to run a business. How are you going to have time to do these family enterprise meetings and understand all this? But it's so important. And, I think I wish that we had done that sooner, even if we weren't trying to value the business or my dad wasn't retiring. I think just having those meetings, even, once a year to start, twice a year, 4 times a year, just coming up with what works.
Now, do you think you could run your own family meetings, or do you think you need a facilitator, like a third party to facilitate and keep the conversations going?
So where we're at now, like at the time, there's no way we could have run our own family meetings. Where we're at now, I would say I would still want to have a facilitator for a certain amount of year, but I would also want to have some unfacilitated meetings throughout the year, because I think we're in a pretty good spot. We can, do that, and but to have a specific, this is family business talk now, and then we just have to go back to family talk. It helps divide, the dinner table discussions. But for sure, having some facilitated talks is a huge benefit, just because it keeps you on track, and it provides that sober second thought or that outside perspective. And going back, a year or 2 years ago, there's just no way we could have had any, we tried, but it was better when it was facilitated.
Well, and I think, you are different people, right? And you react differently. You have different thoughts and ideas. And, a lot of times the loudest voice wins. Me. Right? So we know that sometimes it's harder, because when we say stuff, it's almost like they think it's a decision instead of I'm asking you a question. It's like the decision's already been made, right?
Which is hard on both sides, because Absolutely. I look at it like, from his side, he probably thinks that it's because I'm the loud one, and he's very subdued. And so I think from his side, he's looking at like, well, Pete's just going to win. And on my side, I'm like, well, he's just going to let me win, And so like the whole thing is neither one of us would feel very comfortable. But when you have someone else there that's saying, trying to get you through all that, that's good. Yeah, it really does help.
Yeah. And, I can't stress enough, how important it is to have a family meeting to get on the same page, regardless if you're transitioning it to your family, you're going to sell it to an outsider, or even transition to employees. It's to getting the family all on the same page for a number of reasons, estate reasons, ownership, all kinds of things.
Yeah, or even like, yeah, exactly. Like, wills, all these different things. Like my wife, we still have challenges. I don't know what's going to happen if I get hit by a bus right now, So probably something we should talk about.
Well, it's probably something we should talk about. Yeah. Anyway, any last words, or final advice to first to second generations, whether it's a second generation struggling, or what is it that you would recommend? What advice would you give?
I think that, just a lot of things we talked about. Main thing is start the conversation early. I presume that it's usually going to be the second generation that's going to want to start the conversation early. Maybe not, but in my situation it was. And I tried, and I think that if I had sought out a third party more early on, my dad would have been, easier to listen to me. It's like things even in the business where it's like, sometimes you bring up an idea and it kind of gets like a little bit of traction. But then if you like show a YouTube video with someone saying this cool idea, all of a sudden it gets a little bit more traction, or however. But so if you bring someone else in, I think it's going to help no matter which person is bringing it up, and just finding a way to divide those, business conversations from family conversations.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, thank you. Great advice. I really appreciate you coming in. And so if someone is interested in reaching out to you for any work, where could they reach you?
There's our website, www.ccrbuilding.com. We have our Instagram, also our phone number is 519-472-7461.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
If you like this episode, subscribe to the Business of Family podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can also find Blue Roots on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. On the next show, I'll be back with another amazing guest who will inspire you with their family business insights. Until then, take care and keep it in the family. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, tax, investment, or insurance advice. Before acting on any advice, please contact your personal or company advisors.